So let's talk about it. Suicide, we understand, is a major global health concern that's a substantial contributor to mortality worldwide. Let's just go into the conversation this morning. Miracle Ihoma is with us this morning. He's a clinical psychologist. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much, sir. It's good to be here.
We understand that approximately 79% of deaths occur in developing countries due to suicide. One person is estimated to commit suicide every 40 seconds.
Yeah.
Why so bad? 40 seconds, that's less than a minute.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the second leading cause of death, after accidental deaths.
What's sudden? I mean, it sounds sudden to me because even though, these things have been happening, but in our climate, to hear that people jump into the lagoon, people take, inhale poisonous stuff, people just take anything just to get themselves. What exactly is happening?
Yeah, just like I said, it's the second leading cause of death, and the single most important risk for suicide is a previous attempt, because suicide has, there are three levels of suicide. So there is suicidal ideation or suicidal thoughts. There is suicidal attempt, and then there's suicidal completion. So not everybody, for instance, who has thought about suicide has attempted suicide. And not everybody who has attempted suicide has completed the act of suicide. So there are a lot of people who, start by thinking about it. That's where it starts from, just thinking about the idea of suicide.
What informs that thinking? That's the question.
Now, what informs the thinking is predominantly mental health conditions. So let's take an example with depression, for instance. So when somebody is depressed, typical symptoms would include things like loss of pleasure in previously pleasurable or enjoyable events. So the person loses interest in things that used to interest them. The person experiences low mood, so they want to stay in bed all day most times. It affects their eating behavior. So all of these things can now climax into thoughts of taking their own lives.
Wow.
Yeah, because prior to suicide or preceding suicide is hopelessness. Because someone has to get to a place where they feel like there is no more hope. I can't see anywhere further than I am right now. I can't see any other option, because what is typical to people, for instance, who are suicidal is what is called a dichotomous mindset. A dichotomous mindset is a mindset that thinks only in two dimensions, this or that, black or white. In real life example, it's either I get married to this person or I don't get married at all.
This particular person.
This particular person. So that's why you would hear people commit suicide when a partner breaks up with them, because I can't see myself getting married to any other person if not this person. I don't care if there are other people out there. It's this person I must get married to.
We had a story over in the course of the week of some individual who decided to commit suicide simply because there was the marriage crashed or something. Okay. So I was going to ask a question, about whether or not suicide attempts or suicidal thoughts have to do with economic conditions or situations that someone finds himself. This particular individual that I just talked about, we understand this fellow is supposed to be very, very wealthy. Spent a lot of money on the marriage, on the wedding, and then the marriage, and then, before what is happening, the marriage is crashing and the fellow is having suicidal thoughts. So it doesn't have anything to do with economic condition, does it?
Doesn't.
Not at all, or not much?
Not necessarily, because it's just like saying, now there are risk factors. So, for instance, there is a higher rate of suicide in developing countries than developed countries.
Okay. Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Except that, for developing countries, a lot of suicide are not reported. But even with reported suicide, developing countries have a higher percentage of suicides than developed countries. Nigeria, for instance, is ranked maybe 15th highest suicidal nation in the world. So Africa is, I think about the highest in terms of continent. So yeah, economic factors could be a risk factor to somebody actually going ahead to commit suicide. So it can affect, but that's not the only reason, or that's not the only thing that can affect, right? Other things, there can be other risk factors as well.
Okay.
For instance, things like people's coping mechanisms can affect how they are able, to deal with suicidal thoughts and things like that.
Coping mechanisms due to some previous shocks or occurrences in their lives, right?
Coping mechanisms due to how they have been trained, or how they have trained themselves to interpret situations.
In growing up.
In growing up.
So essentially you're saying it is not something that just suddenly happens.
No, it's not something
It's a
that suddenly
build-up
happens.
over decades.
Yes. Yes, it's a build-up over time. One of the times I was here in the show, I talked about a lady who committed suicide because she failed JAMB. Now, for her, just like I said, people who are suicidal think in dichotomous manner. It's this or that. So it's either I pass this JAMB or I die. That's it for her.
This thing that you just said now brings back some crazy memories. There are many people watching us now who were told that if you don't have maths, if you fail maths in your life, you are done for.
Yeah.
If you identify with that, you can send us a mail. I mean, look, if I do not pass maths, I cannot succeed in this life. So if that kind of person, for instance, failed mathematics in the 80s or in the 90s, the person is
seen as a failure.
Will see himself or herself as a failure simply because of what he or she has been told.
Yeah.
So this is what happens, right?
Yeah.
And this is the build-up.
Yeah. Yeah.
That you're talking about.
For instance, I wasn't good at maths, so I'm a typical example of somebody who didn't pass maths. In fact, just why that story of the lady who committed suicide because she failed JAMB is very relatable to me, is because I didn't just fail JAMB. I wrote JAMB 3 times, but then I failed O-level 4 times. So I wrote WAEC, I failed. I wrote NECO, I failed. I wrote GC, I failed. It was the 4th GC, the second GC I wrote, which was the 4th O-level exam that I now passed. And I started writing JAMB. First time I failed, second time I failed. So it was the 3rd time I passed. So in all of those times, I didn't think about suicide. Yes,
why didn't you think about suicide? Because
the way I cope with difficulties and failures is different from the way that lady has been built to cope with it. Suicide never crossed my mind. What crossed my mind was, okay, so what is exactly the problem? How can I do better in my next exam? That was what was on my mind at the time. So how we have been trained to deal with failures, how we have been trained to deal with difficulties, could actually decide the prognosis of how well we are able to deal with difficult situations or things like suicide or suicidal thoughts, when they come. So people who have not been trained to develop resilience, for instance.
Or to even believe in themselves.
To believe in themselves, who have poor self-esteem. They can have, very poor prognosis of, getting those suicidal thoughts and ultimately attempting to. So,
but that's not to say that it's a hopeless situation for them, is it?
It's not.
Okay.
It's not, but somebody who's suicidal doesn't think that way.
Oh.
Yeah, it is not thinking, if to him is, like I said, preceding suicide is hopelessness. And preceding hopelessness is cluelessness. So someone has to be clueless before they become hopeless.
Pause. Let's take it back. Where does it start from? You've talked about, growing up.
Yes.
You mentioned depression the other time. Which of these situations you've talked about, hopelessness, cluelessness, how does it start for someone who is perhaps in a particular stage now to quickly decode himself and call for help?
Okay. So preceding suicide is hopelessness, and preceding hopelessness is cluelessness. So you have to get to a point where you are clueless before you become hopeless. Cluelessness is, I don't know what else to do. That is why one of the vocabularies you must embrace is a vocabulary called options. You must always have options. It cannot always be this or that. There are other options. So it's not, I either go to this university or I'm not going to university at all. What other universities can I go? It shouldn't be, it's either I become a billionaire or I'm nothing. No, you can become a millionaire, for instance. There are other options that you must embrace. So you must always ask yourself, what are the other options that exist in this situation apart from this option that I might not be able to get at this time? That is it. Then after cluelessness is hopelessness, because if you are clueless, then you become hopeless because you feel that there is no hope for you. other than what you have lost or what you don't have, right? And when you become hopeless, then of course.
So where does depression come in?
Yeah, so depression is what actually constitutes, because the ultimate height of depression is hopelessness, where you feel like, okay, there is no hope, there is nothing left for me to do, and there is nothing left for me here. So the best option is for me to kill myself. Now, this is how a suicidal person thinks. This is psychology of suicide. The psychology of suicide is what a suicidal person wants is to end the pain they are feeling at this time. It's not like they are bad people. It's not like, oh, they want to cause people around them pain. The pain they are feeling is legitimate, right? They are feeling so much pain. I told a group of people that if you want to know how a depressed person feels, somebody who is dealing with major depression, I said, have you ever been sad at any point in your life? They said, yes, they have been sad. I said, multiply that sadness by 100. That is how somebody who is dealing with major depression is feeling at the time. So imagine in that state where you were feeling some sort of sadness and then multiplying that by 100. How would you be feeling, in that state? That's how somebody who is suicidal is thinking, or that's how they are feeling, right? So what they want to do is to end that pain, that emotional pain that they are feeling. So they feel that if I end my life, then I've ended this pain. Except that what I tell anybody suicidal is, and everybody who's listening to me, is, have you ever been dead before? I said, no, they have never been dead. I said, me too, I've never been dead. So I really don't know what it means like to be dead. I really don't know what happens on the other side of life, right? Or death. So is there any guarantee that killing yourself will actually end this pain that you're feeling? In the real sense of it. Like,
or it could get worse.
Yeah. He said that, like, okay, there is no guarantee. I said, yeah, I can't give you any guarantee because I don't know if it will actually do it. But I said, okay, there is something that I know about. There's something I'm sure about, which is seeking help, which is therapy. I've seen people who were dealing with suicidal thoughts, who were dealing with depression, who were dealing with bipolar disorder, who were dealing with borderline personality disorder, who had become better and, dealt with this suicidal ideation, the suicidal thoughts that they are having. Now, that's a guaranteed way. Now, two of these ways, are going in the same direction. They have the same end in mind, except that one is not certain and one is. So killing yourself is not certain, right? But if you go through therapy, it has some level of certainty because it's something that we are seeing in this reality that we live in.
No, if you feel that you need to talk to someone, there is that helpline that has been scrolling on the screen as Dr. Homa has been speaking, because we shouldn't do life alone. No one should do life alone. I've talked about this. Interestingly, I mean, it's something, we'll come to that conversation now. You shouldn't do life alone. You shouldn't ever be so sad and depressed as to say there is no other way. We've had cases of people who locked themselves up in rooms, Dr. Homa, who locked themselves away, who locked themselves in a car, who just do some rash things. Victims of rape, for instance, victims of job loss, victims of robbery, and all those things. Even though, as you said, there are things that one could have come up with from way back in time, isn't it likely that some of these things could actually be triggered by sudden action or sudden trauma?
Yeah. Traumatic events, for instance, it could trigger suicidal thoughts. So when somebody, for instance, loses a relationship, when they, are raped or abused and things like that, it could actually trigger suicidal thoughts, right? But all the same, it still goes back to how much resilience and how much what coping mechanisms that you are employing, whether you're employing a positive or a negative coping mechanism at the time to deal with that situation. Because what I tell people is, no matter what it is you are going through or you have gone through, there are a lot of other people who are going through it, who have gone through it, who did not take their life, who did not consider suicide. They look for other ways to deal with that particular issue that you are going through. So it's just a change and a tilt in the way you're saying it.
We'll get to that in a moment, but let me just ask this. We're a very religious country. Very, very religious people. We go to church, we go to mosque, we do a lot of meditating and all those things. How helpful are those interventions, if I can use that word?
Yeah. Now, there are positives and there are negatives to it.
Okay.
Right, so I'll start with the positive or negative. Let's start with?
Whichever one.
Okay, let me start with the positive. Right, so the positive to that is that research has shown that there's a positive correlation between faith and how people are able to deal with difficult situations.
So faith and mental health?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So when people believe that there is a higher power somewhere who's in charge of their lives, they tend to go through issues or difficulties better than people who do not believe in that higher power. Because if I believe in a higher power, then I believe that, okay, somebody's watching over me, and whatever it is I'm going through, I'll most likely come out victorious. But if I don't believe in a higher power, and I believe that, okay, I am the sole decider of whatever happens in my life, then if this is what my life can produce, then there's really no hope of what to come after this.
So that you said data backs this up?
Data backs this up. Okay. So it's research proven that faith actually has a positive correlation with how much we are able to deal with mental health issues and conditions.
Okay.
But the negative side to it is that because of, especially in a continent like Africa, where we cannot really decipher and put a clear difference between religion and science. We mix them both, and then we, for instance, now begin to attribute things that are scientific to religion. So somebody, for instance, is dealing with depression, or somebody is dealing with schizophrenia, and we say, oh, the person is being pursued from the village. And we say, oh, this person is, the witches and wizards are really dealing with this guy. So instead of us to, because we have that mindset, instead of us to take him to a psychiatric hospital or to a mental health specialist, we take him to church or to a mosque or to a spiritual home. And then most times their situation gets worse, right? So that's where the mix comes in. So that's the positive and negative sides to religion.
Okay, something came to my mind to ask you now. Okay, yes, you said data backs faith.
Yeah.
And there's a data proof to prove correlation between faith and mental health.
Yes.
You use the word faith, not religion.
Yes.
Why? Because it will seem to be a little different.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Faith is belief, right? Believe in a super or higher power. That's what faith is. So it's not just practicing religion.
So religion is the practice.
It's a practice.
Okay.
Faith is belief. When you believe that there is somebody, there is a superpower somewhere, whatever that is for you, who controls your life.
Okay.
Yeah, that actually, gives you more
a measure of hope.
Yes.
Now, to some solutions now, we have just about 5 minutes. Someone now listening to you and watching us, this program right now, what are you willing to tell the fellow who may be suicidal in his head, who has been groomed in a particular way up until this moment that the suicidal thoughts are only increasing in percentage? What would you want to tell the fellow right now?
Yes. So I'll start with what I said earlier. I know what you're trying to deal with. I know that you are trying to achieve. I know what you're trying to achieve with the suicidal thoughts that you're having. You think that killing yourself at this time would end the pain, the emotional pain and trauma that you are feeling. Except that you're not guaranteed it will. But like I said, I know a more guaranteed and a more assured way of dealing with that emotional pain. And it is called therapy. Through therapy, you can deal with that emotional pain and feel better than you are feeling right now. We've seen people get better over time with therapy, and your case would not be an exception. So if you are dealing with those thoughts, please seek help. Seek help, right? It is very important. Don't be too shy not to seek help. Don't be too timid not to seek help. Reach out and seek help, because help is available. When you have problems with your car, you call your mechanic. When you have problems with your physical health, you call your doctor. When you have problems with your clothing, you call your fashion designer. When you have problems with your mental health, you shouldn't be shy to look for necessary help with people who have been certified, trained to help you with that problem. So seek help today because help is available. This is me sending out love and light to you and telling you that there is hope at the end of the tunnel. So don't give up.
Now, this last word, there's this saying in one of the religious, faiths that faith comes by hearing. You've only spoken to this fellow just once, who is listening to you and watching you right now. Yeah. But they've been listening to this thing for donkey years, for decades. How will what you just said now in maybe 1 or 2 minutes change what they've been listening to or hearing for over the past 10 years or more? I ask that because, it's become some sort of a stronghold for them. So getting past that, believing anything different from what the people they respected all their lives have told them might be a little difficult to change.
Yeah. So what I've done now is to sow a seed, right? And hopefully in that seed is watered and grows and germinates, to become something like a tree and a forest, right? So these things, these words I've said to them should trigger them to then seek the help that is needed to dismantle that stronghold that has been built in their minds over time. Okay. So this is a starting point.
Thank you so much, Dr. Homa. Well, we put out that number the other time that you have seen, on the screen, that phone number asking for help. If you want to speak to someone else, and this number is right there. But if you think that, of course, that these are from different organizations, that have evolved, as a result of all of these. But you may want to send us an email if you are very, very adept at talking to Dr. Homa, who has given you this seed. As you said it, our email address is also going to be right there on your Sunrise CTV at channelstv.com. Thank you so much this morning.
Thank you, sir.
For being a part of our conversation and helping to give perspectives to the issue of suicide. Now someone knows that it didn't just start. It's something they've been listening to for a lot of time in their lives. Now they need to change what they listen to so that they can get better at this. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you very much.
Miracle Ihoma is a clinical psychologist. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right. I am told that music has a way of calming the mind, especially dealing with mental health. That's a little bit of what we want to talk about when we return from this break for our home stretch. Do stay with us.